Remove your hands!
Who are you?
Your last warning.
Remove your hand. David blinked. The voice came from behind him, quiet, almost gentle, the way a knife is quiet before it opens something. He turned slowly, his grip still locked around Amara's throat, and found himself looking at a man he had never seen before in his life. A man who looked like he had been waiting. Who are you? David's voice came out harder than he felt. The man didn't answer. He stood with both hands relaxed at his sides. No bodyguards, no weapon visible. Just a stillness so complete it felt like a physical thing. Like the air around him had decided to behave. He was tall, broad shoulders tapering into a lean, controlled frame. Sharp jaw. Dark eyes that were not blinking and were looking at David the way a man looks at a problem he has already solved in his head. "I won't say it again," the man said. "You don't know who you're talking to." David Mensah. The name came out flat, precise, like a file being opened. Born in Accra, educated in London. Your father's import business in Lagos has 3 government contracts that don't exist on paper. Your account in Dubai received 4 transfers in the last 8 months from a shell company in Macau. The man tilted his head, just slightly. "Should I keep going? Or would you like to remove your hand from her throat first?" The mall went completely silent. Every person in that atrium stopped moving. A child somewhere stopped crying mid-breath. The flower stall vendor went rigid behind her display. The music from the boutique speakers seemed to drop a full register as though the building itself understood that something significant was happening and had the good sense to go quiet about it. David's hand dropped. Amara gasped. One sharp, involuntary sound, and both hands flew to her own throat. Her eyes found the stranger standing behind David, and she could not look away. Tall, dark eyes, a tattoo climbing the right side of his neck above his collar. His left sleeve had ridden up at the wrist and dark ink curled there against his skin. His hands were completely bare, no rings, and something about that specific detail made his 2 bodyguards, standing frozen 40 feet away across the atrium, exchange a look like men watching something they had absolutely no reference for. He looked at her. Just 1 second. Just long enough for his eyes to move across her face, her throat, her eyes, the scar above her left eyebrow. And something moved through his expression. Brief, deep, gone before she could name it. But she had seen it. She had seen it, and she could not unfeel it. Then he looked back at David. "Walk," he said. "Now." David's jaw worked. She could see the war behind his eyes. Pride fighting instinct. Arrogance fighting the very animal fear of standing in front of something significantly more dangerous than yourself. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Amara with eyes that promised this was not finished. His mouth opened. "Don't," the stranger said. One word. Soft as a door closing on everything David had been about to say. David closed his mouth. He walked. He did not look back. The stranger watched him go. Then his bodyguard materialized at his elbow, holding out a flat palm. 7 rings. The stranger slid them back on one by one. Gold, onyx, jade, silver. 3 others. Unhurried. Like a man returning to himself after setting something important down. Then he looked at Amara, and his voice when he spoke to her was entirely different from the voice he had used on David. Still quiet, but different in a way she felt rather than heard. "Are you hurt?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "Who are you?" The corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Almost. "Pick up your silk," he said quietly. "The corner is getting stepped on." He turned and walked away. His long black coat moved behind him like a shadow that had decided to follow. The crowd parted without him asking. Within 30 seconds, Kang Jin-ho had disappeared into the Thursday afternoon like he had never existed at all. Amara stood alone between the jewelry boutique and the flower stall. Her burnt sienna silk was on the floor. Her heart was hammering in her throat. Her hands were not shaking. That surprised her, because everything inside her was. She bent down. She picked up the silk. She did not know yet. Standing there with fabric in her arms and a stranger's absence still warm in the air around her, that Kang Jin-ho had not walked away. He had simply changed positions. and he would not stop watching over her. Not now. Not after seeing that scar. Wherever you are watching this right now, drop your city in the comments. I want to build a map of every place this story lands today. Because what you just saw is a woman who ran 12,000 kilometers to save her own life, and a man who has never once removed his rings for anyone, colliding on a Thursday afternoon that neither of them planned for. If something in you is already burning, if you already feel what is coming between these two people, then you know you cannot leave. Stay. Subscribe. Because he just crossed a crowded mall alone and spoke her secrets like a promise he didn't know he was making. And that is the least dangerous thing he's going to do for her. 3 years. That was how long Amara Ose had been building something in Seoul, and she had built it with bare hands and early mornings, and the specific stubbornness of a woman who has decided that surviving is not enough, and that she intends to do considerably more than that. She had come from Accra with one bag and one business idea, and the particular calm that lives on the other side of surviving something that should have destroyed you. She had built her fabric and design shop in Insadong from nothing, from broken Korean that slowly became less broken, from suppliers who tested her until she showed up 4 times in a row with exact specifications and exact payment, and an eye for quality so precise they eventually stopped testing her. From long evenings cutting and hemming and sourcing and building, alone in a small bright shop that had her name above the door and fabric in the window that made people stop walking and look. She had chosen Seoul because nobody she knew had ever been there, because 12,000 kilometers felt like enough distance to finally breathe, because David Mensah belonged to the world she had left. 1 bag, 2 in the morning, her passport retrieved from the drawer where he kept it because he was better at keeping track of important things. And she had walked out of that house in Lekki and not looked back. She had stopped looking over her shoulder 6 months ago. That had been her first mistake. 3 days after the mall, Yuna said his name. They were at the Pojang Matcha around the corner from COEX, eating tteokbokki in the cold evening air, and Yuna, who ran the jewelry boutique and had seen everything from behind her, display, set down her chopsticks and said it the way you say the name of something enormous, with weight, with that specific dropping of the voice that means pay attention, this is bigger than it sounds. Kang Jin-ho, Yuna said, you know what he is? Tell me. The Black Jade Circle. He controls more of this city than the people elected to control it. Newspapers don't write about him, not because they don't know, because they know better. Yuna looked at her directly. No one in 7 years has seen him take off his rings in public. No one has seen him cross a room like that, alone, for a stranger. Amara was quiet. Everyone in certain circles is talking about nothing else, Yuna said. About you. They don't know me. They know he did something for you he has never done for anyone. Yuna picked her chopsticks back up. Be careful, Amara. Amara ate. She thought about dark eyes that had moved across her face and paused at her scar. She thought about a man who had handed back her business card held at the corner so their fingers would not have to touch unless she chose it. She thought about being careful. She thought about how careful had not saved her in Lagos. He came to her shop on Monday, and she heard the door open, and called out she'd be a moment, and finished her cut and set down the scissors and looked up. Kang Jin-ho was standing inside her doorway, all black, a fitted high collar with the edge of the neck tattoo visible above it. His left hand, where the rings caught her shop's warm afternoon light, was resting against the doorframe. He was looking around the space the way he looked at everything, quietly, completely, like he was reading every detail and filing it away. The Kente bolts on the wall, the Accra photograph above her work table, the small warm evidence of a life built with purpose and bare hands. Then he looked at her and held up a small cream card. You dropped this. Her business card. She hadn't even noticed it was gone. She crossed the shop and took it from him. He held it at the corner deliberately, and that single careful gesture did something to her chest that she noted and firmly attempted to dismiss. She walked back to her work table. He sat without being invited, lowering himself into the chair across from her, with the ease of a man who is comfortable in any room he enters. You could have mailed it, she said. I could have. But you came in person. I came in person. She looked at him. He looked back. The light caught the ink on the back of his hand, dark script across his knuckles. And she noticed it and looked away and told herself to be sensible. She made tea. She set a cup in front of him. He wrapped both tattooed hands around it and looked at her over the rim. And the silence between them was not uncomfortable, which was itself the uncomfortable thing about it. "What did you say to him?" she asked, at the end, when you leaned in. "I told him," Jinho said, "that if he put his hands on you again in this city, they would not find him." The directness of it. No decoration, no performance, just the flat, clean truth of what he had said, and what he had meant, and what he was clearly still prepared to mean completely. "He believed you," she said. "He believed me. Because it's true." His eyes held hers. "Because it's true." She should have stood up right then. Should have thanked him and opened the door and made a clean, intelligent exit from this specific kind of dangerous. She knew that. She absolutely knew that. She had known what she should have done in Lagos for a very long time before she finally did it. "How did you know his accounts?" she asked instead. "Dubai, Macau, all of it." "Before I crossed that room," Jinho said, "I wanted to know exactly who I was crossing it for." She stared at him. "You ran a full background check on my ex-husband in one morning. My people are thorough." "Why?" He looked at her over his cup, and the answer was in his eyes before he said it, and she saw it there, and her breath did something involuntary and complicated. "Because he had his hand on your throat," he said, "and I needed to know everything about him before I got close enough to make him regret it." The silence after that sentence had weight. She looked down at her cup. Her heart was doing its loud, persistent work. Her hands were completely still on the table, and she was proud of them. "You're strange," she said. "Yes," he agreed without any apparent concern. She almost laughed. The almost laugh moved through her like light through good fabric, warm and brief and surprising. When she looked up, he was watching her with that expression she was starting to recognize, the one that looked like a man standing at a border he had drawn for himself and was actively reconsidering. He stood to leave. Coat on. One last slow look around her shop. "Lock up properly tonight," he said from the doorway. "I always do. Lock up better than you used to." He left. The door closed. The shop felt different after, rearranged somehow, the air not quite settled. She pressed both hands flat on her work table and told herself very firmly that she was not going to fall toward this man, that she was smarter than this, that she had done the hard work of choosing herself, and she was not about to undo it. She told herself that. She did not entirely believe it either time. Seoul arrived Wednesday, and it felt like breathing Lagos air. Familiar, warm, safe in the way that only people who knew you before the bad things can feel safe. He hugged her outside the Itaewon Cafe, and she let herself be held and said nothing, and neither did he. And for a moment it was enough just to have someone from home who loved her standing in the same city. They sat. He ordered for both of them from memory. She looked at him, warm brown skin, kind eyes, 20 years of friendship in his face, and felt the particular steadiness of someone who had known you at your worst and stayed anyway. She told him everything, the mall, Jinho, all of it. Seoul listened with his coffee going cold and his jaw getting tighter. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment that had a specific texture to it she could not name yet. "Kang Jinho," he said, "you know him." "I know of him." He leaned forward. His voice dropped. "Amara, whatever he did, whatever it felt like in that moment, he is not a good man. The Black Jade Circle has bodies attached to it that nobody will ever count officially. He is dangerous in ways that David put his hand on my throat in a public mall," she said. Even. Clear. Jinho made him stop. "Those are the facts." "And that's all it is?" "That's all it is." Seoul reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His eyes were serious and full of something he had carried for 20 years, without ever saying directly. "I can't watch you walk into something dangerous again. I barely survived watching you in that marriage. Please, just be careful." She looked at his hand over hers. She thought about Jinho's hands, the way he held her card at the corner, the choice he kept giving her without making noise about it. I'm always careful, she said. What she did not know, what she would not know until it was almost too late, was that outside the cafe, a black car sat at the curb. In it, Jin-ho was watching the window, watching Xiun's hand over hers, his jaw tight, and his rings still. He watched for 11 seconds. Then he told his driver to go. They came for her on a Thursday night 11 days after the mall. She was walking home from dinner with Yuna through a side street she had used 100 times. Narrow, amber lit by convenience store signs, residential and quiet. Her keys were in her hand the way she always walked at night, the habit of a woman who had spent enough time being afraid that the caution had become part of her body. She heard the footsteps when she turned off the main road. She walked faster. They matched her. She stopped. They stopped. She turned around. 2 men, big, blank-faced, the specific blankness of people hired to deliver a message rather than make a decision. David was not there. David never got his hands dirty the same way twice. But David was in this completely. This was his answer to them all. His reminder that a stranger in a suit had not changed the fundamental mathematics of her situation. The taller one stepped forward. Amara ran, not in panic, with direction. Back toward the main road, toward light, toward sound, her phone already in her hand, already dialing, and she did not stop to think about who she was calling because her thumb already knew. The call connected on the second ring. Amara. Not hello. Her name. Like he had been waiting without knowing he was waiting. 2 men behind me, she said, and her voice was level and clear because she was done being paralyzed by things that came at her in the dark. Yulgokro side street. Heading toward the main junction. A beat, brief and decisive. Keep running. Don't stop. 3 minutes. She ran. The taller one was faster than she expected. She felt him closing, heard the footfalls getting louder behind her. She was almost at the junction, almost at the spill of light from the main road, when his hand caught her arm and spun her, and she came face to face with him. And she did not scream. She planted her feet and drove her elbow directly into his jaw with everything she had, because she was not the woman who stood still and waited for things to be over anymore. She had decided that a long time ago, on a quiet morning in Lagos, and she had not changed her mind since. He stumbled. It bought her 4 seconds. Then the black car came around the corner hard and fast. The doors opened before it fully stopped. 3 men out, fast and coordinated, and clearly not doing this for the first time. Jin-ho came out last, and he was already moving, coat left in the car, and the streetlight hit the full dragon sleeve on his left arm from wrist to shoulder, and his face had done something she had never seen it do before. It had gone completely, absolutely still. Not the controlled stillness of tea and conversation in her shop. Something older and colder that had been living behind all that control, and had finally, on a quiet street in Mapogu on a Thursday night, found a reason to come all the way forward. The taller man straightened up from her elbow and looked at what had just arrived. He made the wrong decision. He came forward. Jin-ho closed the distance in 4 steps. What followed was fast and precise and deeply, quietly violent. No wasted motion, no performance, no visible anger on his face. Just a man who was extraordinarily skilled at this specific thing. The knowledge so deep in his body, it required nothing from his mind. Moving with the efficiency of someone who has made complete peace with what he is capable of. The taller man went down on the second hit, hard. He did not get up. The second man charged from the left, and 2 of Jin-ho's men met him simultaneously, and that was brief and considerably less gentle. And then the street was quiet again. 40 seconds. The street was completely quiet again. Jin-ho's men stood at the perimeter looking outward, calm, professional, like nothing remarkable had just occurred on a Thursday evening. Jin-ho walked to Amara. He was breathing slightly harder than normal. His eyes moved over her immediately. Face, throat, arm, hands, with the swift, focused attention of a man checking something that matters very much to him. He found the scrape on her palm before she registered it herself. "You're bleeding," he said. "It's small." He took her hand, both of his around hers, slowly, completely at odds with what those same hands had done 35 seconds ago. He turned her palm up and looked at it under the amber streetlight and the contrast of it. The violence, and then this particular deliberate gentleness, moved through Amara's chest in a way she had absolutely no name for. "Come," he said. He did not let go of her hand. She went. In the black car, they sat side by side, and Seoul's night moved past the windows in streaks of light and colour. He had released her hand when they got in, but she could still feel the warmth of it, the weight of his rings, pressed against her scraped palm. Neither of them spoke, and the silence had temperature and texture. "This was David," she said. "Yes. You already knew. When you called, I knew." She turned and looked at him in the dim moving light. Close. Closer than they had been before. She could see the detail of him clearly, the scar through his left eyebrow, the red thread tattoo at his neck, the dark eyes that were looking at her now with something she was getting better at reading, and considerably worse at protecting herself from. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. The real question, not the more, not tonight, the whole of it. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he said. "That is not an answer." "No, it isn't." Jin-ho. The first time she had said his name, she hadn't planned it. It came out the way things come out when your guard has been down long enough, naturally, without announcement, like breathing. Something moved through his face, small, deep, like a room that has been closed for a long time and someone has finally opened a window in it. "You have a scar above your left eyebrow," he said, very low. "You don't cover it. You wear it like a decision you made about yourself." Her breath caught. "The first time I saw it," he continued, "I understood something about you before you said a single word to me." "What did you understand?" "That you had survived something, and chose not to be ashamed of surviving it." A pause that had real weight behind it. "That is not a small thing, Amara." The city glittered outside. The car moved through it. The silence between them had heat and mass and no safe name. The black car stopped at her building and the charged silence of the ride was still sitting between them, warm and complicated and full of things neither of them had said yet, when Amara saw him. Shun. He was standing on the pavement outside her building with his phone in his hand and his jacket half on, and the specific look of a man who had been running, not physically, but in the way people run when they have heard something that frightened them, and have not yet caught their breath from it. He must have gotten word about the street, about the two men. He had come the way he always came when something happened to her. Immediately, without asking permission, because 20 years of loving someone makes you run toward their emergencies before you finish deciding to. He saw the black car. He saw it stop. He saw Amara in the back seat. And then the door opened on the other side and Kang Jin-ho stepped out and the two men looked at each other across the roof of the car for the first time in their lives, and the pavement between them went very, very quiet. Amara got out. She stood between them, literally between them, the car at her back, and felt the specific atmosphere of this moment settle around all three of them like weather. Seyoon's eyes moved from Jin-ho to her face, and she saw what was in them, the relief of finding her unharmed, the love he had never said directly, the specific grief of a man who has arrived at a scene and immediately understood that something has already happened that he cannot undo. Jin-ho stood with his coat in his hand and his rings catching the lamplight, and he looked at Seyoon the way he looked at everything, quietly, completely, reading every detail. And she watched him understand in real time who this was. Not just the man from the cafe window, the man from before any of this, the man who had known her first. Amara. Seyoon's voice was careful, his eyes still on Jin-ho. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," she said. "The two men are handled," Jin-ho said. His voice was not raised. It was not threatening. It was simply the voice of a man stating a fact that was entirely within his authority to state, and both of them knew it, and the knowing sat uncomfortably in the space between them. Seyoon looked at him directly for the first time. "You're Jin-ho." "Yes. I know who you are." "I know you do," Jin-ho said. "Agent Adeyemi." The silence after that was a different kind of silence. Amara looked at Jin-ho. He had known. Of course he had known. He had run background checks in a single morning. He had people who were thorough. He had been watching the man outside the cafe through tinted glass for 11 seconds, and had not done it without knowing exactly who he was watching. He had simply not said it until now, in front of Seoul, and the saying of it here and in this way was the quietest possible version of a declaration of territory that she had ever witnessed. Seoul stepped forward, not aggressively, with the contained energy of a man who has something important to say and is choosing to say it while he still can. "She is not part of your world," he said. "Whatever is happening between you, she is not equipped for what comes with you. She has already survived one man who made her life dangerous. I will not stand here and watch her walk into another one." Jinho looked at him for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "You will stand here and watch her make her own decision, because she is not a woman who needs either of us to make it for her." Amara stared at him. Seoul stared at him. The three of them stood on the pavement outside her building in the amber Seoul night, and the city moved around them completely indifferent to the fact that something significant was happening in this small, lit circle of lamplight. "Amara," Seoul said. He turned to her. His eyes were full of 20 years, of everything he had never said directly, of the specific grief of a man who can see, clearly for the first time, with no room left for the comfortable uncertainty he had been living in, that he is too late. "Please, just think about what you're doing." She looked at him. She held all of it. The love she had for him, the anger still sitting in her chest that she had not yet fully named, the grief of this moment, the warmth of what was standing 10 feet behind her. And she held it without trying to resolve it because not everything needed to be resolved tonight. "I am thinking," she said quietly. "I have been thinking very clearly for 3 years soon. That is how I built everything you see. Don't confuse my feelings for carelessness." His jaw tightened. He looked at the ground for one moment. Then he looked back up at her and he nodded. Once, slowly, the nod of a man standing down from something he knows he cannot win, and has enough respect for her to stop trying. He looked at Jinho one last time. Something passed between the two men. Not a threat, not a concession, just the specific acknowledgement of two people who both love the same woman, and have looked at each other directly, and now know exactly where they stand. Seoul put his phone in his pocket. He turned and walked. Amara watched him go. Behind her she heard Jinho come around the car. He stopped beside her, not touching, close. And they both watched Shun's figure until it turned the corner and was gone. "You knew who he was," she said. "Yes." "From the beginning." "From the cafe," he said. "I ran his name that evening." "And you said nothing." "It wasn't my information to give you," he said. "It was his. And I was not certain yet of everything he had done." She turned and looked at him. He was close. The lamplight caught the ink at his wrist, the red thread at his neck. His eyes were on her face with that full attention that she had stopped trying to look away from. "He loves me," she said. Not as information, as a fact. She needed to say out loud to someone who would hear it fully. "I know," Jinho said. "Does that—" "No," he said, quietly, completely. "It doesn't." She looked at him for a long moment, at the certainty in his face, at the man who had just stood on a pavement and told Seoul Adeyemi, Interpol agent, 20 years of history, the person who had known her first, that she was not a woman who needed either of them to make her decisions for her. She reached up and touched his jaw. He turned his face into her palm. His eyes closed briefly. That small, surrendered thing that was more intimate than anything else he did, and that she had now seen 3 times, and intended to keep seeing. "Take me inside," she said. He opened his eyes, looked at her. "The car," she said. "Finish what you were about to say before Seoul appeared." The corner of his mouth. That almost smile. They got back in the car. She was looking at him. He was looking at her. The space between them, never large in the back, of a car, was shrinking by degrees neither of them was measuring out loud. "You should not look at me like that," he said. Almost to himself. "Like what?" "Like you are deciding something." "Maybe I am," she said. His jaw tightened. His eyes dropped, brief, to her mouth, and came back up. She had seen it. He knew she had seen it. Neither of them pretended otherwise, and the not pretending was its own kind of intimacy. Amara. Her name in his mouth. lower, more deliberate, like it cost him something each time he said it that way, and he was paying it willingly. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't what?" "Don't say my name like that and then do nothing about it." The car stopped. Her building. She hadn't noticed they had arrived. He looked at her for a long moment in the stillness. Looked at her the way he had looked across the mall atrium, like she was the first still thing in a very violent world. And he did not know what to do with having found her and was not looking away from it. Then he leaned forward. She did not move back. His hand came to her face. Slowly, his fingertips at her jaw, the rings cool against her warm skin. And the touch was so careful, it was almost unbearable, because careful was not what she had expected, and not what she had been given in a very long time. And her body remembered the difference immediately and completely. He tilted her face up, and he kissed her, not with urgency, not the way she might have expected from a man who had just put someone on the ground with 40 seconds of controlled violence. He kissed her slowly, deliberately, the way he did everything, completely, with his full attention, like she was the only thing that existed, and existing was the only thing worth doing right now. She kissed him back, and her hand came up and found his chest, and she felt his heartbeat under her palm, and it was not steady, not at all, not even slightly. And somehow that undid her more than anything else had. That this man whose face showed nothing to the world was not steady inside. Not for her. Not right now. He pulled back first. His forehead dropped to hers, both of them breathing. His thumb moved along her cheekbone in a slow movement she was certain he was not aware of. "Go inside," he said, low, rough at the edges in a way she had not heard from him before. "Jin-ho, go inside, Amara." He pulled back, looked at her directly. His eyes were dark and open and full of something that was not going to be simple for either of them, and he clearly knew it and was not flinching from it. "Before I make a decision, I cannot take back tonight." She looked at him for one long moment. Then she got out of the car. She walked to her building door and entered the code on the first try, which was genuinely remarkable, because her hands were finally shaking. The black car did not move until she was inside, and she knew it, and she did not look back, and she was glad she didn't, because she was smiling, and she was not ready for him to see that yet. She lay in her dark apartment and pressed her fingers to her mouth and stared at the ceiling, and thought about all the reasons this was a complete and total catastrophe. She had left one dangerous man, rebuilt herself from nothing in a city that had not asked for her, been so careful and so deliberate and so utterly committed to never again giving a man the specific power that comes from living inside your chest. And then Kang Jin-ho had kissed her like she was something he intended to be careful with. Not careful about, careful with. And the difference between those two things lived in her entire body right now. Disaster, she told herself firmly. She smiled at the ceiling. The terrifying, specific smile that comes just before everything gets beautifully complicated, and you know it, and you cannot make yourself stop. He came back the next evening. She opened the door, and he was standing there with food from the restaurant 2 streets over, in an expression that said he had spent 24 hours deciding something, and had decided it. She stepped back. He came in. He set the food down on her work table and looked at her, and neither of them moved for a moment, and the air between them was already doing something neither of them was going to pretend wasn't happening. She crossed the room and kissed him first, not waiting, not giving either of them the space to think past it. His arms came around her immediately and fully, both of them, like he had been waiting for her to close the distance and had been very patient about it. And he kissed her back with everything that had been controlled and quiet behind those dark eyes. And it was not slow this time. It was warm and fierce and consuming. And she pulled him closer by the front of his jacket, and he made a low sound against her mouth that she felt all the way down her spine. And she kissed him harder, and his hands moved to her waist and pulled her against him. And for a long moment the room was just that. Just them. Just this. Just the specific electricity of 2 people who have been circling each other and have finally stopped. He pulled back just enough to look at her. His chest was rising and falling. His hands were at her waist, ringed and warm, holding her like something he was not planning to set down. You're not afraid of this, he said. I am, she said honestly. I'm terrified. Of me? Of what this already feels like. She touched his jaw, the scar through his eyebrow that matched hers in its refusal to be hidden. We have known each other 2 weeks, and I already called you when I was running in the dark, and it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like breathing. He looked at her for a long moment. I drove past your street 3 times before those men came, he said quietly. I told myself I was passing through. I was not passing through. I was making sure you were safe, and I hadn't found a way to tell you that wasn't going to frighten you. That should frighten me, she said. I know. It doesn't. I know, he said. And the corner of his mouth moved. That almost smile. The one she had started cataloguing. The one that arrived differently every time and hit the same way every time. And she reached up and touched his jaw, and he turned his face into her palm and closed his eyes briefly, and that small surrendered thing was more intimate than the kiss. And they both felt it, and neither of them said anything about it because some things are too important for words. Eat, she said softly, then tell me something true. They sat on her floor with the food between them, and the city glowing outside her window, and he sat with his long legs stretched out, looking entirely at ease in her small warm space, and she sat cross-legged across from him, and looked at him in the light of her apartment, and thought about how wrong this should feel, and how completely it didn't. The rings, she said. He looked at his hands. 7. Always 7. What are they? Debts, he said. People I couldn't protect before I had the power to protect them. I wear them so I don't forget what the power is for. She looked at him, at the rings, at the man who carried that weight on his hands every single day by deliberate choice. And at them all, she said quietly, you took them all off. Yes. Why? He looked at her directly. Because some things require bare hands. She held his gaze, and something moved between them that was too large for the words available, and neither of them tried to fit it into any. She leaned across the space between them and kissed him, softly, briefly, and when she pulled back, his eyes stayed closed for 1 extra second, and she watched that, and kept it in the place where she was collecting all the versions of him that existed behind the control. Your turn, she said. Something you don't tell people. My mind doesn't stop, he said. 4 hours of sleep at most. It plans and calculates and anticipates every hour it's awake. A pause. It has been coming back to a fabric shop in Insadong lately, instead of doing any of that. She smiled. How does that feel? Strange, he said. Better than anything else it does. She moved to his side. He lifted his arm without being asked, and she leaned into him, and he held her with his arm around her shoulders. And they sat like that while Seoul glittered outside and said nothing for a long time. And the nothing between them was completely full. David is not finished, he said quietly, into her hair. I know. He will try again. Something bigger than 2 men on a side street. I know. I need to handle it. She lifted her head and looked at him. I need to know what handling it means. It means David leaves Korea permanently and does not come back. How? That is the part. Don't. She held his gaze steady and direct. Jin-ho, I spent 2 years closing my eyes while things happened around me in that marriage. I'm completely finished with that. If you want me to trust you, and I think you do, then don't ask me to be blind. Don't make me that woman again. He looked at her. A real look. The kind where he was actually deciding, not performing deciding, his eyes on hers with full attention. David came to Seoul, he said slowly, because someone told him where you were. He did not find you on his own. The room went cold around the edges. What? Someone gave him your location, Amara. Someone who had it. She stared at him, the implications of that spreading through her chest like cold water. Who? His jaw tightened. I don't have a confirmed name yet. But you suspect someone. He looked at her and she saw it. In the careful stillness of his face, in the specific way his eyes held hers, without giving anything away. And she understood before he said another word that whoever he suspected was someone she knew, someone close. The cold in her chest spread further. Jin-ho. Not yet, he said. Let me be certain before I tell you something that cannot be unsaid. She held his gaze for a long moment. When you're certain, I will tell you everything, he said. I promise you that. She nodded slowly. He pulled her back into his side, and she went and his arm tightened around her by 1 degree. Just one, like a breath held and released. And outside, Seoul burned bright and cold, and inside her apartment something was growing between them that had no clean name and no guaranteed ending, and neither of them had enough sense left to want to stop it. What she did not know, lying against Jinho's side with his arm around her and his heartbeat steady beneath her ear as the city glittered outside, was that across the city, in a glass office that Seoul's newspapers had never photographed, a man named Chairman Bae was looking at a photograph of Kang Jinho entering her shop, of Kang Jinho staying, of Kang Jinho, for the first time in 7 years of total iron control, being attached to something he could not afford to lose. Chairman Bae set the photograph down. He picked up his phone. He's attached, he said. Use her. And across the city in a hotel room he hadn't slept in, Seoul Adeyemi read the message that came through on his phone and closed his eyes. He had given them her location. He had told himself it was for the mission. He had told himself David would pressure her, and Jinho would step in, and Shun would document everything needed to bring the Black Jade Circle down, and Amara would never be in real danger. He had told himself that every day for 3 weeks, and had believed it every day, until 2 men put their hands on her on a dark side street, and he had read the report and sat very still for a very long time after. Now, they wanted more. Seoul put the phone face down on the bed. He sat in the quiet dark of his hotel room, and he thought about 11 years old and a girl who laughed so loud the whole street heard. It. He thought about the man currently sitting in her apartment with his arm around her, and the look on Jinho's face in every photograph the surveillance team had sent. A look Shaun recognized because he had been carrying a version of it himself for 20 years without ever being brave enough to act on it. He thought about what he had done, and the thing breaking inside him in the quiet sounded exactly like the end of something that had taken 20 years to build, and would take considerably less than that to destroy completely. The morning after felt different, not softly different, not the gentle golden light version of different that people in safe stories get to have. It felt different the way Seoul felt different at 5 in the morning, raw and real and moving fast underneath a sky that had not yet decided what kind of day it was going to be. Amara was awake before the light came. She lay in Jinho's bed, his sheets, his room, his 41st floor with the wall of windows that made the city look like something deliberately arranged for the specific purpose of being looked at. And she stared at the ceiling and listened to him breathing beside her, and thought about everything that had led to this specific moment. The mall, the silk on the floor, 7 rings sliding back on one by one, 2 men on a dark street, a car kiss that had changed the temperature of everything, an apartment floor and a jade ring and a red thread, and all the hours between that first Thursday afternoon and this grey pre-dawn morning that had moved them from strangers to this warm, quiet, completely unplanned this, that felt less like a mistake and more like the first honest thing that had happened to her in years. She turned her head. He was awake. He had been awake. She could tell by the quality of his stillness, not the loose stillness of sleep, but the alert, deliberate stillness of a man whose mind had been running for hours. He was lying on his back, looking at the ceiling, and when she turned, he felt it immediately and looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment. Your mind, she said quietly. Is it planning? No, he said. What is it doing? He looked at her in the grey light. Staying here, he said. That is all it is doing right now. She held his gaze in the pre-dawn quiet. Then she moved closer and he lifted his arm, and she came into his side and he held her, and she felt him breathe. Slowly, deeply. The specific breathing of a man who has set something heavy down and is allowing himself to notice the absence of the weight. The city outside the windows began its quiet transition from night to morning. Neither of them rushed it. Today, she said finally. Today, he confirmed. Bae. Yes. She felt his jaw tighten against the top of her head, felt the shift in him, the controlled stillness returning, assembling itself the way armor assembles, piece by deliberate piece, until he was the version of himself that the world knew. She placed her hand flat on his chest and felt his heart underneath it, and felt the moment it steadied. "Tell me what today looks like," she said. "My people have been tracking Bay's communications since last night," he said. "He is moving faster than I expected. He is not waiting." "What does that mean?" "It means he will come for what he believes I value most, before I can move first." A pause, which means I cannot wait either. She lifted her head and looked at him. "You go to him today." "Today," he said. "And me?" "You stay, Jinho, Amara." He turned and looked at her fully. "Listen to me. Bay's value in using you comes from proximity. If you are somewhere he cannot reach, you are not a weapon anyone can pick up and point at me. Do you understand?" She held his gaze and turned that over. He was not asking her to close her eyes. He was giving her the logic and letting her work through it herself. That was different. That was the difference between the two of them and the language they had slowly, carefully built between them. "Your building," she said. "I stay in your building." "With 6 security personnel and 42 cameras," he said. "Yes." "And you come back," she said. "I come back." "Not a request. Not a negotiation," he agreed. "A promise." She kissed him, soft and certain, and with her hand against his jaw, and he kissed her back and pulled her closer, and the morning held still around them for one more minute before the world outside started moving again, and everything that was coming with it began to arrive. She found out about Seoul at 9 in the morning. She was at her work table in the shop. She had insisted on opening. Jinho had insisted on a car outside. They had reached a compromise that satisfied neither of them completely, which was how she knew it was fair. Cutting a pattern she could not concentrate on when her phone buzzed with a message from a number she didn't recognize. 2 sentences. A name. A confirmation of what Jinho had been building toward telling her the night before. She set the scissors down. She sat very still for a long moment with her hands flat on the work table, and the Seoul morning going on outside her window, and the specific cold of a betrayal she had not seen coming, sitting in the center of her chest, like something that had always been there, and she simply had not known to look for it. Not because she hadn't trusted Seoul, because she had trusted him completely, and without question, and that completeness was exactly what made this specific cold feel the way it did. She picked up her phone. She called him. He answered on the first ring like a man who had been waiting for this exact call for days, and was relieved it had finally come. "Come to the shop," she said. "Now." He came in 12 minutes looking like a man who had not slept in 3 days, which she suspected was accurate. And he sat in the chair across from her work table, without being asked, and he looked at her and he did not try to arrange his face into anything other than what it was. That, at least, that she could hold on to. "How long?" she said. 3 weeks before the mall. "You gave them my address?" "Yes." "You knew David would come." "I told myself it would be controlled. I told myself." He put his hand on my throat, Seon. Her voice was not raised. It was the lower, quieter version of itself that she used when what she felt was too large for volume. In a public place, in front of strangers. He put his hand on my throat and I could not breathe, and you knew he was coming and you let him come. Seon closed his eyes. "Yes. 2 men came for me on a dark street. I know. They had my arm. I was alone. I was running and I was alone. I know." His voice broke on it, clean and audible and real. "Amara, I know. There is nothing I can say that—" He stopped, pressed his lips together hard, tried again. "I love you. That is not an excuse. I'm not saying it as one. I have been carrying it for 20 years and using it as a reason to do things without ever saying it directly as itself, and I am saying it now so you can do with it exactly what you want." The shop was completely quiet. Outside, a delivery truck moved down the street. Someone laughed on the pavement. Seoul going about its ordinary morning as though nothing had just been dismantled inside this small, warm space. "You should have said it 20 years ago," she said. "As itself. Not as a reason for anything. I know. If you had said it 20 years ago, I don't know what I would have said back. But I would have said something real. You deserve something real." "And now?" he asked quietly. She looked at him, at 20 years of him, at the grief of this sitting in her chest alongside the anger and the love she had for him that was real and specific, and not the kind he needed it to be and never had been. And she let all of those things exist at the same time, without trying to choose between them. Now I'm standing in the middle of something I did not plan, she said. Something true. And you are still my oldest friend. Both of those things are true at the same time, and I am not going to pretend one cancels the other. He nodded slowly. He stood. He picked up his jacket. At the door, he turned around. I reported myself, he said, to my supervisors. Full disclosure. The unauthorized contact. Her location. All of it. She looked at him. I'm not telling you for sympathy, he said. I'm telling you because you deserve to know that I am not the kind of person who walks away from what he does and calls it finished. She held his gaze for a long moment. Go soon, she said quietly. Come back when it isn't so raw. I'm not throwing you away. I need time. He nodded once. He left. She sat alone in the quiet shop for exactly 7 minutes. She counted them without meaning to. Then she picked up her phone and called Jin-ho, and he answered before the second ring the way he always did. Like her call was the thing he had been waiting for without knowing it. I know, he said, before she said anything. He told me himself. A pause. The specific texture of his silence when he was recalibrating something. Good, he said finally. That counts. I know it does, she said. Jin-ho, what is happening today? Tell me the real version. Bay is moving, he said. My people picked up communications an hour ago. He is not sending a message this time. He is sending a team. For you. Her chest went cold. When? I don't know exactly. Which is why you are closing the shop right now and coming to my building. She was already standing. Already reaching for her bag. I'm coming, she said. She was 7 minutes from the building when they found her. Not 2 men this time. 4. 2 on foot moving parallel to her in the pavement, and 2 in a black car that pulled alongside her slowly. The way cars pull alongside you when they want you, to know they have been following you for longer than you realized. The door opened before the car fully stopped, and the man who stepped out was not the blank-faced, hired message kind. He was something older and more deliberate. He moved with the specific economy of someone who has done this many times, and has no personal feelings about doing it again. Ms. Ose, he said, Chairman Bay would like a word. She had her phone to her ear before he finished the sentence. 4 men, she said into it, walking without breaking stride. Street outside Insadong Station. Black car, 2 on foot. The man moved fast. He stepped into her path and reached for the phone, and she pulled back sharply, and one of the men on foot caught her arm from behind, and she drove her elbow back into his ribs. Hard, with direction, with everything she had. The way she had on the dark street. The way she had promised herself she would always do now, instead of going still and waiting for it to be over. Grunted. His grip loosened by 1 degree. She used that degree completely. She wrenched free and ran. She knew this street, had walked it 100 times in 3 years, and she ran toward the junction where the foot traffic was dense and the visibility was high. And behind her she heard all 4 of them now. The footsteps multiplying, and the car engine. And she was fast, but the distance was wrong, and she felt the math of it in her chest. The second car came from the opposite direction. It stopped hard at the junction, front wheels up on the curb, doors opening before the engine had fully cut. And Kang Jin-ho came out of it at a full run. He was not wearing his coat. The dragon sleeve was completely visible from wrist to shoulder, the ink moving the way it always seemed to move when his muscles were working. And his face was doing the thing. The complete absolute stillness that was older and colder than anything else in him. And that she had only seen twice before, both times on streets, both times because of her. He looked at the man closest to Amara. Then he moved. He covered the distance between them in 4 strides, and the first man barely had time to turn before Jin-ho was already past his guard. 1 hand at the man's collar, 1 at his arm. And the takedown was fast and hard and without any of the controlled economy she had seen in the side street. This was faster. This was the version of him that had not been thinking tactically, but had been thinking about her. And the difference between those 2 things was audible in the sound the man made when he hit the pavement. The second man came from the left with both hands forward, and Jinho pivoted and caught him by the wrist and turned the arm in a direction. Arms do not turn, and the crack of it made Amara flinch from 12 feet away. The man dropped. The weapon he had been reaching for skidded across the pavement and stopped at the base of a lamppost. 2 of Jinho's men came out of the car behind him and took the remaining 2, one on foot, one from the black car who had stepped out with his hand inside his jacket. And that was fast and loud and considerably less precise than Jinho, and considerably less gentle. And when it was finished, all 4 of Bei's men were on the pavement, and the street had gone into that specific shocked stillness that streets go into after sudden public violence, when everyone present is deciding whether it is over. It was over. Jinho walked to her. He was breathing hard, not slightly harder than normal, actually hard, his chest moving with it. And his eyes, when they reached her face, were doing something she had never seen them do before. Something unguarded and urgent that had not waited for permission to be there and was not going to apologize for existing. He pulled her into him with both arms and held her, and she felt his heart against her cheek. Fast, not steady, not controlled, nothing like the man who sat completely still at her work table and looked at everything with that dark, unhurried attention. And she held him back with both hands in the back of his shirt and said nothing, and he said nothing. And the street began to breathe again around them. "I told you to come directly to the building," he said, into her hair, rough at the edges. "I was coming directly to the building," she said. They were faster. He pulled back and looked at her, both hands at her face immediately, the rings warm, his palms warm, his eyes moving across her the way they always moved across her when he was checking something important. Her face, her neck, her arms, her hands. "Are you hurt?" "No. Amara, I am not hurt," she said clearly. "Jinho, look at me. I'm not hurt." He looked at her. Really looked. His thumbs moved along her jaw in that movement she was certain he was never fully aware of. Then he kissed her, hard and brief, and entirely unlike his other kisses. This one carrying the specific desperation of a man who had been 30 seconds away from something he absolutely refused to let himself finish imagining. And she kissed him back, and gripped the front of his shirt, and felt him breathe out against her mouth like something released. "The building," he said when he pulled back. "Now," she agreed. In his apartment, she sat on the kitchen counter while he stood in front of her, and his hands moved over her arms and her wrists, checking what she had told him, that she was not hurt. And she let him because she understood completely that this was not about doubting her word. It was about him needing to know it with his own hands. There was a difference between knowing something and knowing it, and she understood that now. "4," he said. His jaw was set. "In daylight, on a public street." "Yes." "He is escalating." He looked at her. "Which means I cannot wait. If I wait, he sends 8. If I go to him now—" "You're going today," she said. "Right now. Right now." She held his gaze. "Then be more careful than you have ever been in your life," she said. "Not for yourself. For me. I need you to come back to me more than you have ever needed to come back to anything." He went very still. "Have you ever had something to lose before?" she asked quietly, "going into a room like that?" A long moment. "No," he said. "I haven't." "Then let that change how you move," she said. "Not to make you afraid, to make you precise." He looked at her for a moment that had real weight in it. Then he stepped forward and kissed her, slow and full and with nothing held back. And she kissed him back and held him. And when he pulled back, she kept her hands in his jacket and did not let go immediately. "Come back," she said. "I'm coming back," he said. She let go. He took 4 men into Bei's building, and he took them in through the front entrance in full view of the lobby cameras, because he wanted Bei to see them coming, wanted him to have the 30 seconds between the lobby alert and their arrival on the 44th floor, to sit with the knowledge that Kang Jin-ho had decided to come in through the front door. That 30 seconds was the message. Bei had 4 men waiting in the lobby. They had positioned themselves well, 2 at the elevator bank, 1 at the stairwell door, 1 behind the reception desk with his hand already inside his jacket. Professional. Prepared. completely certain that 4 against 4 was reasonable mathematics. They had not accounted for the fact that Jinho's 4 had been doing this longer, and with considerably higher stakes. The lobby fight was fast and loud, and broke 2 of the marble reception desk's glass panels, and 1 of the decorative columns near the elevator bank. Jinho took the 2 at the elevators himself. The first with a strike that dropped him before he fully turned. The second, with the kind of controlled aggression that comes from years of having no margin for error. Both his men and Bei's men were moving simultaneously across the lobby, and the sounds of it filled the high-ceiling space and echoed, and the lobby cameras recorded all of it. And Jinho pressed the elevator button with his rings catching the overhead light, and stood completely still in the chaos of the room while his men finished what had been started. The doors opened. He stepped in. His 4 men followed. The doors closed. Floor 44. The corridor outside Bei's office had 6 men in it. 6, which told Jinho that Bai had been expecting this visit, and had prepared for it carefully, and had still, somehow, not prepared correctly. Because 6 men in a corridor against Jinho was not a numbers problem. It was a space problem. A corridor gave them nowhere to flank, nowhere to spread, nowhere to use the advantage of their numbers. It turned 6 into 2, and then 1, and then none. Jinho stepped out of the elevator and looked at all 6 of them. "Move," he said. 3 of them made the wrong decision. The first came forward fast with a confidence that suggested he had not been in a corridor with Jinho before. Jinho caught him by the jacket lapel and used his own momentum against him. A pivot, a controlled drop. And he went down hard into the wall and stayed there. The second and third came together, which was smarter, and Jinho took 2 hits, one across the shoulder, one that caught his eyebrow and opened the old scar line. Before he put them both down with the specific, efficient violence of a man who is no longer interested in performing control, and is simply doing what needs to be done as quickly as possible, so he can go back to the woman waiting 41 floors below. His 4 men took the remaining 3. The corridor sounds were loud and not brief, and when it was finished, the 6 men were on the floor, and the corridor was quiet, and Jinho stood outside the office door, breathing hard with blood at his eyebrow, and his rings catching the overhead light, and straightened his jacket and pushed the door open without knocking. Chairman Bei was standing at his window. He had heard everything. Every sound from the lobby. Every sound from the corridor. He turned when Jinho came through the door, and he looked at him, at the state of the corridor visible through the open door, at the 4 men behind him, at the blood at his eyebrow that Jinho had not bothered to address, at the complete absence of uncertainty in his face. And he sat down. Not in defeat, in the specific pragmatism of a man who has been doing this for decades, and knows the difference between a battle that can be won and one that has already been decided. Jinho sat across from him. He placed a drive on the desk, small, matte black. He set it down without ceremony, without drama, the way you set down something that speaks entirely for itself. 6 years of transactions, Jinho said, between your organization and 4 government officials. The kind that do not survive any light at all. Bei looked at the drive. Mutually, not mutual, Jinho said. Only you are on this drive. I have nothing to lose from it becoming public. You have everything. He leaned forward. The woman. You will not touch her. You will not approach her. You will not send men to her street or her shop or anywhere near the life she has built in this city. She is not part of this world. She has never been part of this world. He held Bei's gaze. And if I hear her name from anyone connected to you... He did not gesture toward the corridor. He did not need to. The sounds of it were still present in the air of the room. You have already heard what I do in buildings I am told not to enter. The office was completely silent. Bei looked at the drive for a long moment. He looked at Jinho. He looked at the 4 men at the door and then at the corridor beyond them. And then back at the man sitting across from him with blood at his eyebrow and 7 rings on his hands and an expression so completely resolved it had no edges left to negotiate with. She matters to you, Bei said. Not mockingly, with something that was almost curiosity. The observation of a man who has built a life on understanding what people value and has found something he did not expect. That, Jinho said, is the last time anyone connected to you will speak about her. Bei looked at the drive one final time. The woman is off the table, Hots, he said. Done. Jin-ho picked up the drive. He stood. He buttoned his jacket, one button, unhurried, and looked at Bai with the expression of a man who has said everything that needed saying and considers the matter complete. David Mensah, Jin-ho said at the door. He leaves Korea tonight. Make sure your network doesn't give him a reason to think he can return. He walked out, into the corridor, past the 6 men on the floor, into the elevator. He pressed 1. He stood in the elevator with his 4 men, and the doors closed, and he looked at his reflection in the mirrored panel, the blood at his eyebrow, the scar reopened, the rings catching the light. And for the first time since he had stepped out of the car on the street outside Insadong Station and seen 4 men around Amara, he breathed. He took out his phone. He called her. She answered before the first ring finished. Done, he said. The sound she made, not a word, just a breath, just one single exhaled breath that carried everything in it, moved through him like something he had been waiting for without knowing he was waiting for it. I'm coming to you, he said. I know, she said. I'm here. He came through the door of his apartment and she was standing in the kitchen and she looked at him. One full look, the kind that went everywhere at once, the same checking he always did on her. And then she crossed the room and he met her in the middle and she took his face in both hands and looked at his eyebrow. You're bleeding, she said. Sit, she said. He sat at his own kitchen counter. She found a cloth and warm water, and she cleaned the eyebrow with hands that were completely steady, and he watched her face while she worked. The focused attention in it, the care. And something in his chest did the specific thing it had been doing since the mall. The thing he had stopped trying to control or explain, or put into language that fit. Bae, she said, still focused on his eyebrow. Done. David? On a flight tonight. He's not coming back. She looked down at him then, at his face, at the scar she was cleaning that matched hers in its refusal to disappear. Is it over? This part, he said. Yes. She held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. Then she kissed him, softly, both hands still at his face, her thumbs at his jaw. And he pulled her closer by her waist and kissed her back. And she stepped between his knees and they stayed like that in his kitchen while the afternoon light came through the windows and Seoul went about its indifferent business 41 floors below. She pulled back, looked at him. Thank you, she said. Don't. Let me, she said. Once. Let me say it once. He held her gaze. Once, he said. Thank you, she said, quietly, completely, with nothing performed in it. For the mall, for the street, for today, for every single time you showed up. He looked at her. That open thing behind his eyes, fully open now. No performance, no control layered over the top of it. Just him. Just this. I didn't do it because you needed me to, he said. I did it because I am not willing to go back to what I was before you called me when you were running in the dark. I am not willing to go back to not breathing. That is what today was. That is what all of it was. She stared at him. I have been alone by choice for a very long time, he said. Because it was simpler. Because there was nothing I could not walk away from. And then you said, don't say my name like that, and do nothing about it, and I realized I had already stopped being able to walk away, and I hadn't noticed it happening. She reached up and touched his jaw, the reopened scar, the scar through his eyebrow that matched hers. I noticed, she said softly. I noticed before you did. He almost laughed. The real one, brief, surprised, unguarded, and she collected it the way she collected all of them, carefully, in the place where she kept everything real about him. Then he kissed her, standing up from the counter, pulling her against him. And it was not the soft, brief kitchen kiss of a moment ago. It was the full version. The version that had been building since a Thursday afternoon in a mall, and had been building through every moment since, and had nowhere left to go except here, into this. Into the specific heat and certainty of 2 people who have stopped pretending they can be careful about each other. She kissed him back with everything, her hands in his jacket, his arms around her completely. They moved through the apartment without breaking the kiss, and the city outside the wall of windows was doing its glittering afternoon thing, and neither of them was paying any attention to it at all. Later, the city was fully dark. She lay against him with her hand flat on his chest and his heartbeat slow and steady beneath her palm, and the wall of windows full of Seoul's nighttime glitter, and the quiet between them was the best kind. Full, complete, needing nothing added to it. "The red thread," she said quietly. His hand moved slowly against her shoulder. On your neck. What does it mean?" A pause. "Korean mythology," he said. "A red thread that connects two people who are fated to find each other, regardless of time, regardless of distance, regardless of how far apart they begin. The thread is always there, always pulling." She lifted her head and looked at him, at the tattoo, at the man. "You had that before you knew me. Years before. Why?" He looked at her in the low dark of the room. "Because I have always believed there was someone specific, that the thread was real, that it ended somewhere." A pause. "I just did not know yet where." She looked at him for a long moment. "Jinho." "I know," he said. "It is a lot." "It's a lot," she agreed. "I'm going to need time to catch up to you." "I have time," he said simply. "As much as you need." She laid her head back on his chest. He held her. Outside, Seoul burned bright and cold and completely indifferent. She thought about 12,000 kilometers and one bag and a one-way ticket to a city she had chosen because it was far enough to finally breathe. She thought about the silk on the floor of the mall. She thought about picking it up. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, into the dark, into his chest. His arm tightened around her. 1 degree. Just one. Like a breath held for a long time and finally, completely, released. "Neither am I," he said. 3 weeks later, she brought him to her shop after closing. Not for ceremony, not for drama. She had been thinking about it for 3 weeks without knowing she was thinking about it. And then one evening, the thinking became something else. A decision, clean and simple, the way her best decisions always were. And it was simply time. She was locking up when he arrived. He always arrived like this now, without announcement, as natural as weather, as though he had always been part of the rhythm of her evenings. He came through the door and looked at her the way he looked at her now, with nothing held back, and she looked back the same way. "Come here," she said. He came. She took his left hand in both of hers and looked at the rings. All 7. Gold, onyx, jade, silver. 3 others whose stories she was still learning and intended to keep learning. She looked at them for a long, quiet moment. "Tell me one," she said. "One of them. One name." He was quiet. She waited. She had learned his quiets, the deflecting ones, the deciding ones, the ones that meant something was coming that cost him to give. "My younger brother," he said. "He was 17. I was 20. I did not yet have the power to protect him from the things I was moving through." His jaw was tight in the way it was tight when something was too large for his face to contain entirely. "The jade one. That's him." She looked at the jade ring. She lifted his hand slowly and she pressed her lips against it. Against the jade ring, gently, deliberately, with full attention. And she felt his entire hand go completely still beneath hers. Not the controlled stillness. The other kind. The kind that happened to him when something reached past everything he had built to protect himself and found what was underneath. She looked up at him. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, and would spend a long time afterward trying to find a name for. Not the controlled version of him. Not the almost smiling version. Not the opened window version. Something underneath all of those. Something that had been there the whole time, waiting for a specific reason to come all the way up. Something with no performance in it at all. "Amara," he said, just her name, in the voice that cost him something each time he used it that way, and he paid it willingly every time. "I know," she said. He pulled her up and kissed her. Standing in her small shop in Insadong with the kente bolts on the wall and the Accra photograph above the work table, and the burnt sienna silk in the window that she had picked up off the mall floor and kept. That she would always keep. And he kissed her with nothing held back. and she kissed him the same way. Both her hands in his jacket, his arms around her completely. The shop warm and quiet and entirely hers. And now, in the way she was still making peace with and finding that the peace came easier every day, a little bit his too. He pulled back, his forehead to hers, the rings warm against her back where his hands were. "What happens next?" she said. "Next," he said, "I take you to dinner. At the restaurant I chose 3 weeks ago that you have been asking about every single day since. And after that?" "After that," he said, "we figure out the rest as we go." "That is not a plan," she said. "No," he said. And then the smile came. The real one, the full one, brief and warm and completely unguarded. The one that changed his whole face into something younger and lighter and entirely his own. The one she had now collected 17 of and intended to spend a very long time collecting more. "But it's ours," he said. She looked at him. At the man who had taken off his rings in a crowded mall on a Thursday afternoon for a woman he did not know. At the scar through his eyebrow. At the ink from his wrist to his shoulder. And the red thread at his neck that had been pointing towards something long before either of them had arrived in the same room. At the jaw and the dark eyes that had looked at her scar on the first day and understood something about her before she had said a single word. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" "Let's go figure it out," she said. She took his hand. They walked out into the Seoul evening, the city bright and moving and beautifully indifferent to the two of them in the very best possible way. And the door closed behind them, and the lights of Insadong caught the 7 rings on his hand, and the silk in the window of her shop, and everything she had built, and everything that had found her in the building of it. His fingers tightened around hers, not possessively, not as a claim, just warmly, certainly, the way you hold something you have decided, clearly, completely, without reservation, to keep, like a thread pulled gently taut between two people, who have finally, after everything, found the other end of it. And she held on. If you made it to the end of this story, then you watched a woman who had been made small and afraid and invisible choose herself so loudly that the choice followed her across 12,000 kilometers and built her an entirely new life. And then you watched a man who had been dangerous and controlled and completely alone for so long. He had stopped noticing the weight of it. Look at that woman and take off everything he used to protect himself. 1 ring at a time. Some of you watching this are somewhere in the middle of your own version of this. Maybe you are still in the mall, still feeling the hand at your throat and waiting for it to loosen. Maybe you are standing in a room at 2 a.m. with 1 bag and a passport and the specific calm that lives on the other side of a decision you have already made. Maybe you have already made it to your soul, your city, your chapter, your new beginning. And you are just now starting to believe that what is waiting on the other side of all that surviving is not emptiness. It is not emptiness. Drop your city in the comments right now. Let us build a map of every place this story traveled today. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that being truly seen is possible. That it can find you when you least expect it, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon in a city that is not yours, when you are just trying to get through the day and get home with your fabric. Subscribe. Because every single week we come back to this space and we tell the stories of women who are complex and desired and completely impossible to forget. Women who choose themselves even when it is hard, even when it costs them, even when the version of themselves they are walking toward feels very far away. She made it to the silk. She made it to the shop. She made it to herself. And so will you.